In 1982, actress Dominique Dunne was poised for major Hollywood stardom after starring in the box office smash Poltergeist. However, behind the scenes, Dominique is caught in the web of a violent relationship with her abusive boyfriend, a chef by the name of John Thomas Sweeney. When Dominique breaks things off for good with John, he just can't take no for an answer. And when he shows up at her house on Halloween Eve, determined to convince her to give him another chance, Dominique steps outside to talk to him. It would be the last thing she would ever do. Hello and welcome to The Dark Side of Love. I'm your host, Bianca Sloan, author of suspense novels about the dark side of love. And this week I'm putting a spotlight on part 1 of the case I'm calling A Case of Murder. Dominique Ellen Dunne was born on November 23, 1959 in Santa Monica, California, to ranching heiress Ellen Beatrice Lenny Griffin Dunne and Dominique Dunne, a writer and producer. Dominique's older brother was the writer John Gregory Dunne, who married the writer Joan Didion. Dominique began his career as a stage manager for early TV shows, eventually becoming an assistant producer on the classic anthology show Playhouse 90, before rising through the ranks to become vice president for a major television studio. He went on to produce movies including the Al Pacino flick Panic in Needle Park. Dominique was the youngest of Ellen and Dominique's children. The couple, who had married in 1954, later divorcing in 1965, had 5 children in total, including sons Alexander and Griffin. Griffin, the oldest of the Dunne children, gained fame as an actor, starring in the movies An American Werewolf in London, My Girl, Dallas Buyers Club, and Uncle Nicky, which, if you know, you know. The Dunnes also had 2 additional daughters, both of whom died in infancy. As Dominique Dunne wrote in an article for Vanity Fair, the loss of their 2 daughters meant that for he and Ellen, quote, Dominique was all 3 daughters in one to us, triply loved. Petite, dark-haired Dominique, who stood just a hair over 5 feet, and who the Los Angeles Times described as, quote, the much-loved daughter of a literary family, grew up in the wealthy enclave of Beverly Hills. Dominique shared with Vanity Fair that his daughter was, quote, extravagantly emotional, a collector of stray animals. She adored her older brothers and was always totally at ease in a sophisticated world without being sophisticated herself. Dominique's parents were known for their lavish parties. Luminaries like Warren Beatty, Dennis Hopper, David Niven were regular attendees. The Dunnes even hosted their own version of a black and white ball, attended by Natalie Wood, Ronald Reagan, and, wait for it, Truman Capote. Dominique attended the Harvard Westlake School in Los Angeles, the Taft School, a private boarding school in Connecticut, and finally, Fountain Valley School, a private college prep institution in Colorado. While a student at Fountain Valley, she caught the acting bug, starring in several school productions, including West Side Story and The Mousetrap, opposite her one-day-to-be-famous classmate, Tony Goldwyn. After Dominique graduated from high school, she spent a year abroad in Florence, Italy, soaking up Italian culture, studying art, and learning the language. When Dominique returned to the States, she tried college for a hot minute, enrolling at Colorado State University. She quickly realized college wasn't for her and decided it was time to go home and pursue acting in earnest. She took classes at the famed Beverly Hills Playhouse, founded by legendary acting coach Milton Katselas, whose students included Patrick Swayze, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Kim Cattrall. And in the seeming blink of an eye, Dominique's talent propelled her in front of the camera to star in a slew of popular TV shows and movies, including Family, Lou Grant, and a movie of the week, Diary of a Teenage Hitchhiker. Dominique shared in Vanity Fair that Griffin had joked that, quote, one day she decided to become an actress, and the next week she was on a back lot making a movie, and that from then on, she never stopped. And indeed, Dominique is on a roll with her career. Her big break comes in 1981 when she's cast in her first feature film, a movie called Poltergeist, about a typical all-American family whose house is possessed by not nice ghosts, or poltergeists. Dominique's love life also gets a boost that same year when she meets a man by the name of John Thomas Sweeney. The burly 6'1" John Thomas Sweeney Jr., described by the Los Angeles Times as clean-cut and muscular with wheat-colored hair, was 4 years older than Dominique. He was the eldest of 6 children born to John Thomas Sweeney Sr. and his wife Maura in the coal mining town of Hazleton, Pennsylvania, located about 2 hours northwest of Philadelphia. People magazine reported that the Sweeneys were a poor and troubled family. John Sr. worked as a machine operator for the Beryllium Corporation. He was also an alcoholic who frequently assaulted his wife in front of his kids, everything from choking her to breaking her jaw. John Jr. would try to intervene, which is when his father would turn his ire on his son. In an interview with the Los Angeles Times, John Jr. said, quote, "I loathed it, the violence." He also told the paper that his first memory of brutality between his parents was of his father's hands squeezing his mother's neck. John's parents divorced when he was 14, leaving his mom to work as a waitress in order to try to keep the large family afloat. People magazine reported that John was, quote, bitterly ashamed of his family and filled with a sense of worthlessness because he was a member of it. John was determined to flee the depressing circumstances of his dysfunctional home and tiny blue-collar Hazleton while he was at it, coming to realize that his escape hatch went through the kitchen. John set his sights on becoming a chef, and at the age of 19, he enrolled in a culinary arts course at Luzerne Community College. A year later, a diploma in one hand, a bus ticket in the other, John headed west to the City of Angels, finding his way into a kitchen position at an LA eatery named Piccolo's. A year after that, he landed a gig as a sous chef at the swanky Ma Maison, the brainchild of chef and restaurateur Patrick Terrell. Ma Maison is credited with launching the culinary career of Wolfgang Puck, as well as introducing the concept of California Nouvelle cuisine, which focuses on sustainable and seasonable ingredients. The restaurant is a see and be seen hotspot for the Hollywood elite, with Eater LA noting, quote, packed in the patio were the likes of Jack Nicholson, Burt Reynolds, Fred Astaire, Elton John, Rod Stewart, Ringo Starr, Stevie Wonder, and Marlon Brando. Not only was the restaurant a hub for some of the biggest celebrities of the time, but businessmen and lawyers also dominated the space for what became known as Ma Maison's drunk lunches. Lifestyles of the rich and famous host Robin Leach astutely observed in the book A Taste of Hollywood, the story of Ma Maison, that the eatery, quote, truly became the favorite culinary playground for Hollywood's rich and famous. It's so exclusive, the phone number was unlisted. It is the perfect place for a hungry young chef, no pun intended, looking to make his mark in the culinary world. People magazine reported that John was, quote, ferociously ambitious and genuinely talented. He was a quick study and worked nearly round the clock, learning as much as he could about what it took to become a master chef. John eventually worked his way up to becoming Wolfgang Puck's chief assistant, and after 2 years, Patrick sends John to Europe to further hone his skills in the kitchen, resulting in John being named assistant chef at the famed La Oasis restaurant on the French Riviera. This is a lot for a kid from Hazleton, Pennsylvania. A year later, he returned to the States and Ma Maison, taking over the kitchen on an interim basis after Wolfgang Puck left to open the legendary Spago. John's success even earns him a small, local boy-made-good write-up in his hometown newspaper, the Hazleton Standard-Speaker, as well as a bigger, even more expansive feature in the Hazleton Sunday Independent. In general, John is well-liked by his co-workers, with Chef Michael Feig, who worked in the kitchen at Ma Maison alongside John, telling True Hollywood's story, quote, first impression of John was high energy. He was always moving, very creative, seemed to get along with everybody fairly well. A bit temperamental, he was out to impress. This was John's stepping stone to brighter things. Working at Ma Maison gives John a window into the glitz and glamour that he craved. And when he and Dominique met by chance at a party toward the end of 1981, They saw something in each other that fills a need of sorts. As People magazine observed, quote, Dominique gave him easy entree to that world, which enhanced the excitement of being with her. But there was angst as well as elation. Among Dominique's clever friends, the poor boy from Hazleton felt his old sense of worthlessness surging back, and with it, a dread that Dominique would reject him. Dominique's friend Erica Elliott told the Los Angeles Times that her friend was, quote, really vulnerable when she met him. I guess he had a vulnerable side that he let Dominique see. She loved animals. She looked at him as a poor animal that needed love. She didn't realize that he was dangerous. Ellen Dunne, Dominique's mother, told the paper about her daughter's feelings for John, quote, she was fiercely protective of him, and I think she loved him very much in the beginning. However, Dominique's friend, actress Gloria Gifford, didn't believe that her friend was in love with John madly, deeply, or otherwise, telling E! True Hollywood Story, quote, this guy swept her off her feet because he was totally 100% zoned in on her from the minute he saw her. There's nothing more seductive than somebody that's 100% into you. Facts. John and Dominique are drawn together by their love of Europe, cooking, and animals. And within weeks, literal weeks of meeting, they set up house in West Hollywood, renting a one-bedroom house together on Rangeley Avenue. It becomes clear pretty quickly that things that attracted the pair to each other really aren't enough to keep them together, because as it turns out, there's not a whole lot of there. The truth is, John and Dominique are woefully mismatched. Perhaps the biggest wedge between them is their family backgrounds and their temperaments. Dominique came from a loving family, and as People magazine observed, quote, she was comfortable with her feelings, sure of her worth, unawed by the famous and powerful. John, on the other hand, having grown up around poverty, violence, and alcoholism, had no real idea how to express his emotions, and so they manifested as raging outbursts. He was consumed by jealousy and eventually wanted to possess Dominique's every waking moment, hiding it, People observed, quote, in the cunning guise of devotion. As Dominique's friend Gloria noted to E! True Hollywood Story, quote, he didn't want her to have friends. He wanted to do everything with her. He started to pull her away from her friends. Classic abuser behavior. 100%. John would show up at Dominique's acting class and to her horseback riding lessons, and he was so enraged at the thought of her doing love scenes with male actors, he'd crash the sets of the TV shows that she was working on. He would even try to dissuade her from taking acting jobs because he was so jealous of her doing love scenes. He even accused her of having multiple abortions, although there is no evidence whatsoever that this ever happened. Family friend, film producer Charlie Wessler, who's known Dominique since she was 6, told E! True Hollywood Story he believes Dominique probably thought she could save John, saying, quote, the side that Sweeney showed her was this sort of pathetic puppy dog who needed somebody to help him. I think in the same way that Dominique would rescue her dogs and take care of them, she was rescuing this guy Sweeney. Regardless, Dominique is excited about her new romance and eager to show him off and arranges for John to meet Charlie, who relayed to E! True Hollywood Story that the first time he met John, he, meaning John, had ordered a bottle of Dom Perignon for the three of them to have at lunch, which, okay. However, Charlie says they weren't even halfway through the first bottle before John ordered a second bottle. And it struck Charlie as odd for a few reasons, because one, it was mostly John drinking, since neither Charlie or Dominique were big drinkers, and that two, Dom ain't cheap. Does he have that kind of money to be throwing around on bottles of Dom Perignon? But it just all felt a bit much. Like he was showing off, like he thought he was supposed to be swinging his wallet around and popping bottles for a casual lunch. Charlie shared with the show that he walked away from that first meeting feeling as though, quote, my guess, after meeting him only twice, was that he was the kind of guy that never felt like he belonged. You could tell by his behavior that he pushed all of the goodness that he could come up with on you. And it just seemed phony. It seemed fake. And it struck me at the time that he really didn't seem like her kind of guy. Okay, so strike one with Charlie. So Dominique close with her family, and she is eager for John to get their stamp of approval. And it turns out that their impression wasn't all that different from Charlie's. So she'd brought him to New York to meet her brothers and her father, and Dominique observed in Vanity Fair that, quote, only Alex of the four of us had voiced his dislike of John Sweeney when Dominique introduced him into our lives. He went on to describe a moment when Dominique's brothers teased her about getting married soon, and she emphatically insisted marriage wasn't in the cards for her. Dominique noted, quote, I was relieved, for although I could see that Sweeney was excessively devoted to her, there was something off-putting about him, so very similar to what Charlie said. He went on to say, quote, that night, I phoned her mother and said he is much more in love with her than she is with him. And Lenny said, that's Dominique's mother, you're absolutely right. By the time of this meeting, Poltergeist had been released, and Dominique was on the cusp of becoming a major star. The movie had fantastic reviews, it was going bananas at the box office, and was on its way to becoming a classic of the horror genre. I can remember seeing Poltergeist in the theater way back when, and it was scary as crap. Just a little aside. But with the success, this major movie success, come the admirers. So Dominic described an incident in Vanity Fair that was relayed to him by son Alex about how they were at a restaurant and an enthusiastic, slightly tipsy fan, a guy, runs up to Dominique to repeat what had by now become her signature line in Poltergeist, what's happening? It would be like if you saw Julia Roberts at a restaurant and you ran up to her and you said, big mistake, big, huge, like you get excited when you see these, stars, these actors, these actresses. Well, John just can't take this in stride, and he becomes incensed by this guy running up to his girlfriend, and in retaliation, he picked up the guy and shook him. As Dominic noted in Vanity Fair, quote, Alex said that Sweeney's reaction was out of all proportion to the innocent scene going on. Alex said he was scary. Dominic further described meeting the couple for lunch the following day at the famed Lutece restaurant. John and Dominique were late, and when they finally arrived, it was clear that she had been crying. And because John was a chef at Mon Maison, the chef at Lutece made a big fuss over him. He kissed both cheeks, they exchanged pleasantries in French, and he comped the whole meal for them. However, despite the attention, the adoration, this love fest, Dominic noted that he, quote, found Sweeney ill at ease, nervous, difficult to talk to. It occurred to me that Dominique might have difficulty extricating herself from such a person, but I did not pursue that thought. Griffin wrote in his memoir, The Friday Afternoon Club, about his sister and John that, quote, her burgeoning career made Sweeney feel like a failure, which he took out on her. At the time, it was incomprehensible to Dominique's family the depth of John's rage towards their daughter. And remember, too, that this was the early 80s, and domestic violence was viewed much differently back then. Dominique's mom, Ellen, she bluntly said to the Los Angeles Times, quote, boy, we were all so stupid. She went on to describe an incident where a crying and distraught Dominique came over one night and said, oh, Sweeney has such a terrible temper. He smashes furniture and throws dishes, and I said, Dominique, that is frightening. I've never forgotten her answer. She said, oh, he'd never hurt me. Dominique could not have been more wrong. Irrational jealousy and possessiveness morphed into physical violence. Once, John yanked out chunks of her hair by the root. After that incident, Dominique fled to her mom's house, and after John showed up a few days later bearing shame and a bouquet of flowers, Dominique forgave him. In one particularly chilling and galling instance, Dominique had landed a guest starring role on Hill Street Blues, which before there was Law and Order, there was Hill Street Blues. So Dominique was playing the role of a battered girl, except Dominique did not require the magic brush of Hollywood makeup artist to look the part, as the massive bruises and deep red scratches scattered across her face and neck had been inflicted on her by John right before she filmed the episode. So when you watch the episode and you see those bruises on her face, those are not from makeup artist. Those are from John Sweeney. And in an attempt to fix their problems, John and Dominique attend couples therapy, but things were getting worse, not better. In an unsent letter, Dominique urged John, quote, don't live for me, Live for yourself. You do not love me. You are obsessed with me. The person you think you love is not me at all. It is someone you have made up in your head. I think we only fight when images of me fade away and you are faced with the real me. The only man I'm interested in is you, but we are not compatible. When we are good, we are great. But when we are bad, we are horrendous. The bad outweighs the good. The whole thing has made me realize how scared I am of you. John's violence towards Dominique continues to escalate. In late September of 1982, shortly after 3 a.m., the couple erupted into a screaming match. John grabbed Dominique by her neck and flung her to the ground, where he then began to strangle her, much the same way that his father would strangle his mother. As it happened, Dominique had two friends visiting from Chicago, Brian Cook and Denise Dunne, who were staying over, and they were sleeping on the couch in the living room. But they woke up, and they heard Dominique gagging, with Brian telling People magazine, quote, "It was the worst sound I had ever heard." Brian ran to Dominique and John's bedroom, and a gasping Dominique bluntly says, quote, "He tried to kill me." John denies it. He told Brian, mind your own business, and he tries to coax Dominique back into bed. Dominique pretended to go along with it, but then she slipped out of the bathroom window and bolted for her car, an electric blue VW Bug convertible. John raced outside and threw himself across the front of the car, holding on to the windshield wipers. Dominique kept driving, but she finally did stop long enough so that he could jump off before she sped off into the night. The humongous bruises ringed Dominique's neck for days. For Dominique, this was it. She realized that she could not love this wounded animal back to wholeness and decided the time had come to walk away. She spent the next few days dodging John by hiding out at her mom's house or with friends, all while John frantically called around town, desperate to find her. He even places a bizarre call to Miguel Ferrer, son of singer-actress Rosemary Clooney and actor Jose Ferrer, cousin of George. Miguel, ironically, was one of the few friends of Dominique who thought John was an okay guy to that point, but he was quickly disabused of whatever warm and fuzzy feelings he might have had for John. Because as Miguel described it to E! True Hollywood Story, John calls him frothing at the mouth, demanding to speak to Dominique, and how he knows that Miguel and Dominique were sleeping together, he knows the truth, and on and on and on. And as Miguel said, it was, quote, just insane stuff. The veneer was gone. And Miguel says, look, man, Dominique, she's not here. I don't know where she is. And John says, well, I don't believe you. I'm coming over. And Miguel's like, go ahead. You know where I live, but I'm warning you, you come over here and you will be dealt with. John does not take Miguel up on his offer. Chef Michael Feig says to the program about his coworker's relationship with Dominique, quote, she was his life. I mean, she was very, very important to him. And when things started going badly, and when they separated, that was it. When they were going poorly, John was going poorly. After some time had passed, Dominique called John and told him that it was over, that she wanted him to move out and move on. He agreed, and after he packed his things, she moved back in and changed the locks. Dominique's friends breathe a sigh of relief that she has made the long overdue decision to cut ties with Sweeney, with Miguel Ferrer telling E! True Hollywood Story, quote, as far as I knew, everything was okay. It was a chapter of her life that was behind her. It was a bullet that she had dodged. October 30th, 1982. It's Saturday night, Halloween Eve. Dominique is home at the house on Rangeley Avenue. She's been cast as Robin Maxwell in the NBC science fiction miniseries V, and she's expecting one of her co-stars, actor David Packer, to come over so that they can run lines. Earlier that day, John had molded a mask made out of chocolate to look like Dominique, and had also carved some pumpkins for her and had everything delivered to her, excited for her reaction. He waited anxiously for her to call him. He's at work. He's at the restaurant Mommy's On. And he is sure that this grand gesture would be the turning point back to reconciliation. Well, Dominique does call John, but her response is not the one he is hoping for. She makes it clear that it was over between them. There would be no figuring it out, no working on things. She was done. John does not want to hear this. Oddly, though, when he hangs up the phone, he's strangely calm. As Michael Feig told E! True Hollywood Story, his coworker didn't bang his fists, he didn't yell, he didn't scream, he's just chill. Despite being so calm, John is described by E! True Hollywood Story as being, quote, baffled and crushed by this turn of events. And so, John calls Dominique back, but she doesn't answer. And he keeps calling, desperate for her to pick up, to talk to her. But she does not respond. At around 8:30 p.m., Dominique is on the phone with a girlfriend, when in a pre-call waiting era, John asks the operator to break into the call. People magazine reported that Dominique told her friend, quote, oh God, it's Sweeney. Let me get him off the phone. Her girlfriend begged her not to do it, not to hang up. But Dominique says, no, he's upset. I better take the call. So Dominique hangs up with her girlfriend to take the call from John, who asks to come over. Dominique says no. While she's on the phone with John, there's a knock on her door. Her co-star, David Packer. Well, John heard a guy's voice, and that was it. John hung up the phone and told Michael Feig that he'd be back. John walks out of the restaurant and he heads west on Melrose Avenue, walking the 2 miles through the damp night air to the house to confront Dominique. John knocks on the door. Dominique left the chain on the door and cracked it open to talk to him. David, her co-star, asked if he should leave. John said yes. She said no. Stay in the house, that she would step out into the porch to talk with John. People magazine reported that within minutes, David heard John and Dominique arguing loudly. He then heard loud smacking sounds against the windowsill due to John banging his hand against it. Then he heard 2 screams and a thud. Freaked out and scared, David doesn't call the police, but rather he phones a friend and gets their answering machine and leaves the message, quote, if I die tonight, it was by John Sweeney. He works at Ma Maison restaurant. According to what David later told the police, he put the Poltergeist soundtrack on, of all things, on the record player to drown out the noise of Dominique and John arguing outside. And outside, things are continuing to escalate. David hears Dominique screaming. He peers out of the peephole, but he doesn't see anything. Finally, David calls the police. However, in this pre-911 era, he's told that this is out of the department's jurisdiction. And according to what former LAPD detective Harold Johnston told E! True Hollywood Story, the cops on the other end said to David, quote, if he was any kind of a man, that he would go out and help Miss Dunne. Well, David's unfortunate response is to slip out the back door in an attempt to escape. By this point, John had dragged Dominique into the neighbor's yard. David saw that John was bent over Dominique, who was unconscious. John told David to call the police, which he did. Except instead of sticking around for the cops to arrive, David ran. He finds a payphone and he calls LAPD one last time, but again, he does not wait for police, and he takes off. When police do get to the house, they find John, who held up his hands and freely admitted, quote, I killed my girlfriend, and I want to kill myself. Dominique wasn't dead. However, she had no pulse. She wasn't breathing, her eyes fixed and dilated. She had been strangled, her neck red and raw, swollen and bruised. She was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center and placed on life support. LAPD notified Ellen, then Dominic, who got on a plane from New York and headed west. The news of a beautiful up-and-coming actress, fresh off of a hit movie and with Dominique's pedigree to boot, rocks Hollywood, making headlines around the world. Dominic recalls in his Vanity Fair article that when he arrived in Los Angeles, doctors called him at Ellen's house to ask permission to insert a bolt into Dominique's skull. A bolt, in order to relieve the pressure on her brain. Over the course of the next few days, doctors would perform a series of brain scans in an attempt to find any sign of brain activity. However, the result was always the same. The prolonged oxygen deprivation from being strangled meant there was no brain activity. Dominique would never wake from her coma. On November 4th, 19 days before her 23rd birthday, and 5 days after the attack on her life, the Dunne family consented to remove Dominique from life support. Dominique Dunne was 22 years old. Dominique's heart and kidney were donated, and 2 days later, on November 6th, hundreds gathered for her funeral at the Church of the Good Shepherd in Beverly Hills. She was buried in Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery near actresses Norma Crane and Natalie Wood, both of whom were good friends with Ellen. As the Dunne family tries to make sense of the senseless, police are trying to get answers from John, except he proves to be a wholly unreliable narrator. Next week on Part 2, John Thomas Sweeney goes on trial for killing Dominique. However, will the Dunne family see justice? Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of The Dark Side of Love. I'm your host, Bianca Sloan, and show your love for The Dark Side of Love by visiting thedarksideoflove.com for show notes and transcripts. While you're there, sign up for my newsletter to be notified about new episodes, and you can also find a link to my Patreon page where you can access bonus material and other fun stuff. Learn more about my suspense novels about the dark side of love by visiting biancasloan.com. Thanks for hanging out with me, and join me next time for another tale of love gone wrong. I'll see you on the dark side.